I'm Ramiro, 35, a software engineer in Seattle with a complicated relationship with my dad. Our Sunday breakfast tradition at our favorite diner was sacred until last week. Dad arrived fidgeting, sliding an envelope across the table with a smile. "I have a gift for you," he said. Inside wasn't concert tickets but loan documents totaling $800,000. "Must be settled by Monday," he stated flatly. When I refused, his face transformed rage, replacing warmth as he grabbed the coffee pot and hurled the scalding liquid at my chest. An hour later, the police arrived. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if family betrayal stories make your problems seem smaller. I grew up in Boston, the only child of hard-working immigrant parents who came to America with nothing but dreams. My father, Harold, worked multiple jobs: construction during weekdays, security guard on weekends, and occasional handyman work whenever someone called. He'd leave before dawn and return long after dinner, his hands calloused and shoulders slumped from exhaustion. Despite his absence, his influence loomed large in our small apartment. My mother, Isabella, was the warmth in our home, balancing my father's stern pragmatism with genuine affection. She worked as a housekeeper for wealthy families in the suburbs, often bringing home their discarded books, which fueled my love for reading and learning. Our apartment might have been small, but Mom filled it with love, music, and the aroma of home-cooked meals. Everything changed when I turned 15. Mom was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer, and within 3 months, she was gone. Her absence left a void that neither my father nor I knew how to fill. We orbited each other like awkward planets, connected by gravity but unable to bridge the emotional distance between us. Dad channeled his grief into work and pushing me academically. "You need to be twice as good as everyone else," he'd say, reviewing my homework with critical eyes. Every A- was a disappointment. Every achievement merely met his expectations rather than exceeded them. I understood later that this was his warped way of showing love, preparing me for a world he found harsh and unforgiving. Despite the pressure, or perhaps because of it, I excelled academically. I graduated high school as valedictorian and became the first in our family to attend college. Boston University offered me a substantial scholarship, though not enough to cover everything. I worked part-time at the campus library and as a coding tutor to make ends meet. Dad contributed what he could, though he never mentioned what financial sacrifices he was making. College opened my world. I majored in computer science, finding sanctuary in the logical world of programming where rules made sense and efforts yielded predictable results, unlike my relationship with my father. During those years, our communication dwindled to brief phone calls and occasional holiday visits filled with uncomfortable silences. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at a tech startup in Seattle. The distance from Boston felt necessary for my growth. Over the next decade, I climbed the corporate ladder steadily from junior developer to project manager to senior software engineer at one of the industry's leading companies. My financial situation grew increasingly comfortable. I purchased my first home at 30, a modern 2-bedroom condo overlooking Lake Union. I built a healthy investment portfolio, enjoyed occasional international travel, and finally felt stable. 5 years ago, my father retired from his construction job. He seemed content with his modest pension and Social Security benefits. He'd downsized to a small house in the suburbs of Boston, joined a local chess club, and appeared to be enjoying a quiet retirement. We established a rhythm of weekly phone calls, where conversations remained superficial but cordial. When I visited Boston quarterly for work, we established our Sunday breakfast tradition. Sally's Diner became our neutral territory, a place where we could share a meal without the weight of being in either of our personal spaces. We'd discuss safe topics: sports, weather, neighborhood changes, distant relatives. It wasn't deep connection, but it was something. About 6 months ago, I began noticing subtle changes in my father's behavior. His questions about my finances became more frequent and specific. "How's that retirement account looking? Ever consider taking out a home equity loan? What's your credit limit these days?" I attributed his curiosity to his own retirement planning and brushed it off. The week before the incident, Dad called me 4 times unusual for someone who typically waited for our scheduled Sunday calls. He mentioned having something important to discuss, something that couldn't wait. He sounded anxious but refused to elaborate over the phone. "Some things need to be said in person," he insisted. I arranged to fly to Boston a few days early before my scheduled business trip, concerned but not yet alarmed. I had no idea that my life was about to implode over pancakes and coffee. Sally's Diner hadn't changed in the decade I'd been visiting. The vinyl booths remained the same faded turquoise, the linoleum floor still had that mysterious sticky patch near the restrooms, and the oversized clock above the counter perpetually ran 7 minutes fast. Our usual booth by the window offered a view of the neighborhood where I'd spent my childhood, now gentrified almost beyond recognition. Diane, our regular waitress with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses hanging from a beaded chain, greeted me with familiar warmth. "The usual for you, honey? Coffee, black, Western omelet, wheat toast?" She didn't need to write it down after years of serving us. I nodded, settling into the familiar comfort of routine. Dad arrived 15 minutes late, which was unusual for a man who considered punctuality a moral virtue. More surprising was his appearance. He wore a pressed button-down shirt and slacks instead of his typical weekend flannel and jeans. His silver hair was neatly combed, and he'd recently shaved, the scent of aftershave noticeable when he leaned in for our awkward half-hug. Traffic was terrible, he offered, though the Sunday morning streets had seemed quiet during my drive over. He fidgeted with his silverware, rearranging the napkin on his lap multiple times. I hadn't seen him this nervous since my high school graduation. We began with our usual small talk. The Patriots' chances this season, the unseasonably warm weather, Cousin Elisa's new baby. But Dad kept checking his watch, rushing through conversation that typically would have stretched comfortably through our meal. "How's work treating you these days?" he asked, his tone overly casual. "That promotion came with a pretty good salary bump, right?" "It's fine," I answered, growing suspicious. "Why the sudden interest in my compensation?" He waved dismissively. "Can't a father be proud of his successful son?" Before I could respond, his demeanor shifted entirely. "Actually, I have some exciting news. A surprise for you." Diane arrived with our food, momentarily interrupting whatever revelation was coming. Dad barely acknowledged his favorite blueberry pancakes, instead reaching into his jacket to retrieve a cream-colored envelope with my name written on it in his distinctive block lettering. "A gift," he said, sliding it across the Formica tabletop. "Go ahead, open it." The envelope was heavyweight stationery, the kind used for wedding invitations or formal announcements. For a bizarre moment, I wondered if my 70-year-old father was announcing his engagement, or perhaps a round-the-world cruise he'd been secretly saving for. I tore the sealed flap carefully, expecting concert tickets or maybe a vacation voucher, some attempt at father-son bonding. Instead, I pulled out a stack of papers, loan agreements from banks I'd never heard of, credit card statements with astronomical balances, handwritten IOUs, and finally, a note written on personal stationery. Final notice: $800,000 to be paid in full by Monday, April 17th. No extensions, no exceptions. It was signed simply VM, with a phone number. I looked up at my father, confusion giving way to disbelief. "What is this?" Dad took a sip of coffee, his hand trembling slightly. "I've been meaning to tell you for some time now. I've had some financial difficulties." "Financial difficulties?" I repeated, flipping through the documents. "Dad, this is nearly $1 million in debt." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "It started small, after your mother died. The casino helped me forget, just for a few hours. I was always going to pay it back when I hit a winning streak." His expression hardened. "I'm not proud of it, but what's done is done. The important thing is settling it now." "And you expect me to do that?" The documents in my hands suddenly felt radioactive. "You're doing well for yourself," he said, as if requesting a small loan for car repairs. "You could take out a home equity line, liquidate some investments. It wouldn't be easy, but you could manage it." I stared at him, searching for any sign that this was some elaborate, terrible joke. "Do you understand what you're asking? This would bankrupt me. I'd lose everything I've worked for." "You don't understand," he hissed, glancing nervously around the diner. "These aren't bank loans with payment plans and interest rates. These are dangerous people. They've given me until Monday to pay up, or they'll take the house, and that would just be the beginning." "So your solution is to transfer your problem to me?" The volume of my voice was rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "How long has this been going on? Years? Decades?" Dad's face flushed. "You owe me this much. Who paid for your braces? Your school trips? All those college application fees? I gave everything for you. That's what parents do." Several diners at nearby tables glanced our way. I lowered my voice again. They provide for their children without keeping a ledger of debts to be collected later. "So you're refusing to help your own father?" His voice took on an unfamiliar edge, desperate, angry. I took a deep breath, folding the papers deliberately and placing them back in the envelope. "I won't enable this. I can help you find a gambling addiction counselor, maybe talk to a bankruptcy attorney, but I won't give you $800,000 to hand over to loan sharks." The transformation in his face happened in an instant. The mask of fatherly concern dropped, replaced by something ugly and unfamiliar. His eyes narrowed, nostrils flared, jaw tightened. "You ungrateful little..." He didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he reached for the coffee pot that Diane had left on our table for refills. Time seemed to slow as he gripped the handle and swung the pot toward me. I had just enough time to register what was happening, but not enough to move. The scalding liquid hit my chest and arms, soaking through my shirt instantly. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, a burning intensity that short-circuited all other senses. The diner erupted in chaos. Customers gasped and shouted. Diane rushed toward us with a stack of napkins. Dad stood up, knocking his chair backward. "This is your last chance," he growled, looking down at me as I gasped in pain. "Pay the debt by Monday, or don't consider me your father anymore." Then louder, for the benefit of the horrified onlookers, "You're dead to me. Get out of my sight." The irony wasn't lost on me, even through the searing pain. He was throwing me out of the restaurant he'd invited me to. But before I could point this out, he stormed toward the exit, leaving me scalded, stunned, and surrounded by strangers witnessing the most bizarre family breakdown imaginable. The pain was extraordinary, a searing, relentless burning that radiated across my chest and down my arms. My skin went from shocked white to angry red within seconds as blisters began forming under the soaked fabric of my shirt. The coffee had been fresh, nearly boiling, and I'd taken the full brunt of it at close range. Sally's diner dissolved into pandemonium. People shouted, pushed back chairs, and rushed toward me with napkins and ice. Diane moved with surprising speed for her age, returning with clean towels and a first aid kit from behind the counter. "Don't touch the shirt," she warned as I instinctively tried to pull the scalding fabric away from my skin. "You might tear the skin underneath." A woman I'd never seen before appeared at my side. "I'm a nurse," she said, her voice calm amid the chaos. "My name is Sophia. We need to cool these burns immediately. Can someone fill a clean container with cool, not cold water?" As Sophia directed the impromptu medical response, Frank, the diner's manager, was already on the phone with 911. His voice tight with tension. "Assault with hot coffee. Second-degree burns at minimum." "Yes, the perpetrator has fled the scene." "No, they're related. It's his father." Through the fog of pain, I registered my father's final words before he'd stormed out. "You're dead to me." The physical agony somehow amplified the emotional blow. This man who had raised me, however imperfectly, had just disowned me publicly because I wouldn't bankrupt myself to pay his gambling debts. The betrayal burned as intensely as my scalded skin. Sophia carefully cut away my shirt with scissors from the first aid kit, revealing angry red splotches across my chest and upper arms. "These are second-degree burns," she confirmed, her expression professionally neutral, but her eyes conveying sympathy. "You'll need proper medical treatment, but we need to cool them first to prevent deeper tissue damage." Someone brought a plastic tub filled with water. Sophia helped me position my arms over it while another diner draped wet towels over my chest. The cool relief was immediate but temporary. As soon as the towels warmed, the burning sensation returned with a vengeance. "Ambulance is 8 minutes out," Frank announced, returning to hover anxiously nearby. "Sir, do you want us to try contacting your father? Or other family?" I shook my head, wincing at the movement. No family nearby. And my father is not an option right now. The next hour passed in a blur of pain and confusion. Paramedics arrived, administered pain medication, and transported me to Massachusetts General Hospital. The emergency room staff worked efficiently, cleaning the burns, applying antimicrobial ointment, and wrapping my chest and arms in sterile bandages. The doctor informed me I had sustained second-degree burns over approximately 15% of my body, serious but not life-threatening. "You're lucky," she said, checking my chart. Another few seconds of contact or slightly hotter liquid could have meant third-degree burns requiring skin grafts. Lucky wasn't exactly how I felt. I was still lying on the examination table, waiting for discharge paperwork, when two police officers appeared, a tall black man with a close-cropped beard and a shorter Latina woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Mr. Vega? I'm Officer Jackson. This is Officer Rivera," the man said, showing his badge. "We'd like to ask you some questions about the incident at Sally's Diner, if you're feeling up to it." I nodded, the pain medication creating a slight fog but leaving me coherent enough. They took my statement, their expressions remaining professionally neutral, as I explained the situation, the envelope, the debt, my refusal, the coffee pot. "And you had no prior knowledge of your father's gambling debts?" Officer Rivera asked, making notes in a small notebook. "None," I confirmed. "We weren't especially close, but I spoke with him weekly. He never mentioned gambling problems or financial troubles. We attempted to locate your father at his residence," Officer Jackson said. "He wasn't there, and neighbors report seeing him leave with a suitcase shortly after the diner incident." A cold feeling settled in my stomach, unrelated to my injuries. "He's running." "It appears that way," Officer Rivera agreed. "We've put an alert out for him, but given that this is assault and not a major felony, it won't be the highest priority case." As they continued asking questions, my phone buzzed in the plastic belongings bag beside the bed. With the officer's permission, I checked it. Unknown number. "Hello?" I answered. "Is this Ramiro Vega?" The voice was male, deep, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "Yes. Who's this?" "Your father owes me a substantial sum of money. He assured me his son would cover his debt if he couldn't." My heart raced. "I never agreed to that. That's between you and Harold. My concern is getting paid. $800,000 by Monday. Harold gave me your address as collateral. Nice lake view you've got there." The line went dead before I could respond. I looked up at the officers, my hands shaking. That was them, the people my father owes money to. They know where I live in Seattle. Officer Jackson's expression hardened. "We need to escalate this. Rivera, call Detective Sanchez." He turned back to me. "Sir, it sounds like this situation extends beyond simple assault. We're dealing with potential organized crime involvement." By the time I was discharged from the hospital 3 hours later, the police had arranged for a patrol car to drive by my condo in Seattle regularly, though they acknowledged the limitations of such protection. "Cross-country jurisdiction complicates things," Detective Sanchez explained after joining the case. "I'll coordinate with Seattle PD, but you should consider staying somewhere other than your home for a few days." I left the hospital with prescriptions for pain medication and antibiotics, care instructions for my burns, a police case number, and a profound sense that my life had fundamentally changed. The Uber ride to my hotel felt surreal. I'd checked out that morning expecting to return to my father's house for an uncomfortable but ordinary dinner. Instead, I was bandaged, medicated, and effectively homeless in my hometown. In the privacy of my hotel room, I checked my phone again. 6 missed calls from unknown numbers, 3 voicemails, each more threatening than the last, 17 text messages from different numbers, all with the same message: Monday, $800,000. Or else. I double-checked the door lock, wedged a chair under the handle, and lay carefully on the bed, trying to find a position that didn't aggravate my burns. Sleep seemed impossible, but exhaustion eventually overcame fear and pain. My last conscious thought was wondering how my father, the man who had lectured me about financial responsibility my entire life, could have possibly accumulated such massive debt. And why, after all these years, was I only learning about it now? I woke to sunlight filtering through cheap hotel curtains and the uncomfortable tightness of bandages across my chest and arms. For a blissful moment, I forgot the previous day's events, then reality crashed back with the buzzing of my phone. Another unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. After carefully changing my bandages according to the hospital's instructions, I called my employer in Seattle to request emergency personal leave. The HR director was understanding, if confused by my vague explanation about a family emergency. With a week of absence approved, I faced the question of what to do next. Part of me wanted to board the next flight to Seattle, but that felt like running away. Whatever this situation was, it wouldn't disappear with distance. My father had dragged me into something dangerous, and I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I rented a car and drove to my father's house in Medford, a modest Cape Cod-style home he'd purchased after retirement. The neighborhood was quiet on a Monday morning, most residents already gone to work. I still had my emergency key, though I hesitated before using it the last time I'd seen my father. He'd assaulted me and disowned me in the same breath. The front door was unlocked, which immediately raised my suspicions. Inside, chaos greeted me. Furniture overturned, drawers pulled out and emptied onto the floor, pictures knocked from walls. Someone had searched the place thoroughly and violently. "Dad?" I called out, knowing he wouldn't answer but feeling compelled to check anyway. The house remained silent. I picked my way through the wreckage toward his small home office. The desk had been cleared by sweeping everything onto the floor, but the mess revealed something interesting: a loose floorboard under the desk, partially exposed where the area rug had been pulled back. Kneeling carefully to avoid stretching my burned skin, I pried up the board to discover a shallow hiding space. Inside was a manila envelope containing what appeared to be years of gambling receipts from casinos throughout New England, particularly Foxwoods and Mohegan Sunday. Some dated back to the year my mother died nearly 20 years ago. Also in the hiding place, a burner phone, a small notebook with coded entries that appeared to be gambling wins and losses, and several threatening letters from someone identified only as VM, the same initials from the note in the envelope my father had given me. I sat on the floor amidst the chaos, piecing together a timeline from the documents. My father's gambling hadn't started recently. It had been going on for decades, beginning shortly after my mother's death. Small bets at first, then increasingly larger wagers as he chased losses. Cash advances on credit cards, personal loans, second mortgage on our family home. What shocked me most was finding evidence that he'd continued gambling heavily, even during my college years when he'd claimed to be working extra shifts to help with my tuition. In reality, any financial contribution he'd made to my education had likely come from gambling wins, temporary upswings, in a long downward trajectory. In the bedroom, the devastation continued. Dresser drawers emptied, mattress slashed open, closet contents strewn about. My mother's jewelry box lay broken on the floor, its contents missing. I felt a pang of grief. Dad had promised those pieces would stay in the family, eventually going to my future wife or daughter. Now they were likely pawned or stolen by his creditors. As I surveyed the damage, a knock at the door startled me. I approached cautiously, peering through the side window to see an elderly woman standing on the porch. Mrs. Patterson, my father's next-door neighbor for the past 5 years. "Ramiro, thank goodness," she said when I opened the door. "I've been so worried about your father. Strange men have been watching the house since yesterday afternoon." "What men?" I asked, ushering her inside despite the mess. "2 men in a black Cadillac," she explained, clutching her cardigan closed. "They sat there for hours, then went to the door. I heard shouting. When they left, your father came out with a suitcase, looking terrified. He got into a taxi without even locking his door. That was yesterday around 4. Then different men came back in the night." She gestured at the destruction. "I suppose they did this." I thanked Mrs. Patterson for the information and assured her I would handle the situation, though I had no idea how. After she left, I continued searching the house, finding more evidence of my father's secret life. In the basement, behind the water heater, I discovered a fireproof lockbox containing photographs my father with various unsavory-looking characters at casino tables, his expression ranging from elated to desperate depending on the picture. One photo particularly caught my attention. My father shaking hands with a well-dressed man in his 50s, both smiling for the camera against the backdrop of a luxurious casino interior. On the back, written in my father's handwriting, "Victor Mendez, my lucky charm, 2010. VM." The pieces were falling into place. The lockbox also contained financial statements showing the pattern of my father's addiction, occasional big wins, followed by catastrophic losses, leading to increasingly desperate borrowing. Most disturbing was finding my mother's life insurance payout had been completely gone within a year of her death, gambled away while I was still grieving her loss. As I continued investigating, memories from my childhood resurfaced with new context. Dad's unexplained absences on weekends. The times our electricity was shut off despite his supposedly steady income. The college fund that mysteriously shrank, forcing me to take on more student loans than expected. In the kitchen, I found another shocking discovery taped behind the refrigerator loan documents in my name that I'd never signed. My father had committed identity theft, using my Social Security number to take out a $75,000 loan 3 years ago. This explained the strange calls I'd received from collection agencies last year. Calls I'd dismissed as scams because I knew I hadn't taken out any such loans. My phone rang again, Detective Sanchez. "Mr. Vega, we've identified Victor Mendez as the likely creditor pursuing your father," she said without preamble. "He's known to law enforcement as a loan shark, with ties to organized crime in Boston. Several of his debtors have disappeared over the years, though we've never been able to connect those disappearances directly to him." "I'm at my father's house," I told her. "It's been ransacked. I found evidence my father has been gambling for decades and that he stole my identity to take out loans." "Don't touch anything else," she instructed. "We'll send someone over to process the scene. And Mr. Vega, I strongly recommend you don't return to your condo in Seattle yet. Mendez has connections across the country." After the police arrived to document the scene, I checked into a different hotel under a false name, paid in cash, and tried to process everything I'd learned. My father wasn't just a casual gambler who'd gotten in over his head. He was a lifelong addict who had systematically lied to me, stolen from our family, and eventually committed fraud using my identity. Now he'd fled, leaving me to face the consequences of his actions. The betrayal cut deeper than the burns still throbbing beneath my bandages. All those years of his stern lectures about responsibility, his disappointment when I didn't meet his impossibly high standards while he was secretly destroying our family's financial security one bet at a time. As evening fell, I received a text from yet another unknown number. "We know you're still in Boston. You have 36 hours remaining. Pay your father's debt, or you'll both regret it." Attached was a photo of me entering my father's house that morning. They were watching me, and the clock was ticking. 2 days after the diner incident, I arrived at Northeastern University, where I was scheduled to give a guest lecture for a former colleague's computer science class. I'd considered canceling, but maintaining some normalcy seemed important. Plus, a university campus felt safer than sitting alone in a hotel room jumping at every sound. The lecture went well. Despite my discomfort, the burns were healing but still painful, requiring bulky bandages beneath my shirt. As students filed out afterward, my phone buzzed with a call from my Seattle office. My executive assistant, Laura, sounded anxious. "Ramiro, 2 men came looking for you today," she said without greeting. They wouldn't state their business or leave their names. Security escorted them out, but they waited in the parking garage for hours. My stomach dropped. "Did they approach anyone else?" "They cornered Timothy from accounting, asking about your salary and assets." Timothy was our company's payroll manager. He didn't tell them anything, but he was pretty shaken up. I thanked her for the warning and ended the call, my mind racing. Mendez's reach extended to Seattle, just as Detective Sanchez had warned. I headed for the parking garage where I'd left my rental car, scanning my surroundings with newfound paranoia. I spotted them before they saw me, 2 men in dark suits, standing beside a black SUV with out-of-state plates. One was scrolling through his phone while the other surveyed the area. They matched the description Laura had given of the men at my office. I ducked behind a concrete pillar, weighing my options. The elevator and stairs were both beyond the men, leaving me effectively cornered. As I contemplated calling campus security, the decision was made for me. One of the men looked up from his phone directly at me. "Mr. Vega," he called out, his voice echoing in the concrete structure. "We just want to talk." They approached casually, as if this were a perfectly normal business meeting. The taller one spoke again. "Your father made promises he couldn't keep. Mr. Mendez doesn't appreciate that." "I'm not my father," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "His debts aren't my responsibility." The shorter man laughed without humor. "Family takes care of family. Your father assured us his successful son would cover his obligations if necessary." "And if I don't?" The taller man shrugged. "First we take your father's house, then your condo. Then we start looking at more personal assets." His hand moved slightly, revealing the outline of what could only be a gun beneath his jacket. My heart pounded. "I need more time. Monday has passed, Mr. Vega. Mr. Mendez's generosity has limits." The confrontation might have escalated further if not for Warren, the parking garage security guard, choosing that moment to begin his rounds. He noticed us immediately, hand moving to the radio at his belt. "Everything okay over here, folks?" he called out, walking toward us. The two men exchanged glances. The taller one handed me a business card with only a phone number printed on it. 24 hours, Mr. Vega. Call this number when you have the money ready." They walked unhurriedly to their SUV and drove away while Warren watched suspiciously. "Those guys bothering you, sir?" "Just a misunderstanding," I lied, my voice shaking slightly. "Thank you for checking." Back at the hotel, I called Detective Sanchez to report the encounter. Her response was not encouraging. "We can file a report for intimidation, but without explicit threats or actions, there's little we can do. These operations are careful to stay in gray areas legally. So, I'm on my own?" I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. "Not entirely. We're still looking for your father, and we're building a case against Mendez. But these investigations take time." She paused. "Mr. Vega, have you checked your credit report since discovering your father's identity theft?" I hadn't. Following her suggestion, I pulled up my credit report online and felt physically ill at what I found. My previously excellent credit score had plummeted nearly 200 points. In addition to the $75,000 loan I'd already discovered, there were 3 maxed-out credit cards and a home equity line of credit against my condo, all opened within the past 18 months, all with my forged signature. All told, my father had stolen over $300,000 using my identity money that had presumably gone toward his gambling debts. No wonder he'd been asking about my financial situation. He knew exactly how much credit I had left because he'd been systematically destroying it. I called my bank immediately, only to discover my accounts had been frozen pending a fraud investigation, apparently. Someone had attempted to wire a large sum from my savings account that morning. The bank representative couldn't provide details but confirmed that the request had included all my personal identifying information. My financial life was imploding in real time. I had limited cash, frozen accounts, compromised identity, and dangerous men expecting payment within 24 hours. I was staying in a hotel under a false name, unable to return to either my father's house or my own condo. That evening, a brick crashed through my hotel room window with a note attached. "Time's running out. Pay or disappear. So much for anonymity." I called Jason, my oldest friend from college who lived in Cambridge, explaining as little as possible while asking if I could stay with him for a few days. He agreed without hesitation, and I relocated that night, constantly checking to ensure I wasn't followed. Jason's spare room became my makeshift command center as I tried to untangle the mess my father had created. I took emergency leave from work, filed identity theft reports, and spoke daily with Detective Sanchez, who reported no progress in locating my father. On the 4th day after the diner incident, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Ramiro?" My father's voice sounded strained, almost unrecognizable. "Where are you?" I demanded, anger surging through me. "It doesn't matter. Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" The concern in his voice after everything he'd done ignited my fury. "Am I okay? You threw boiling coffee on me. You stole my identity. You destroyed my credit and left me to deal with your loan sharks." "No, Dad, I am not okay." "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I never meant for this to happen. It started so small, just a few bets after your mother died. It helped with the pain. Then I needed bigger bets to feel the same relief. Before I knew it, save it, I cut him off. "Where's the money, Dad? Did you gamble away all $300,000 you stole from me too?" His silence was answer enough. "I'm in trouble, son," he finally said. "Deeper than you know. It's not just the money anymore. I've been working for Mendez, helping launder his operations cash through the casinos. I know things that could put him away for life." "Then go to the police." "It's not that simple." His voice cracked. "Listen, there's a way out for both of us. Your condo, it's worth what, $600,000? If you sell it, plus your investments, we could pay off Mendez and—" "No." The word came out with finality that surprised even me. "I'm not selling my home to fix your mistakes. You don't understand what these people are capable of," he shouted, desperation evident. "I understand perfectly," I replied, a calm clarity washing over me. "I understand that you've been manipulating me my entire life, making me feel inadequate while you destroyed everything our family built, using my achievements to enable your addiction. It stops now. Ramiro, please." Turn yourself in, Dad. To the police, not to Mendez. Tell them everything you know. It's your only chance, and mine." I ended the call, blocking the number immediately afterward. Something had shifted inside me. A lifetime of seeking my father's approval suddenly seemed like a sad waste of energy. For the first time, I saw him clearly. Not as the stern but loving father I'd idealized, but as a deeply flawed man whose addiction had corrupted every aspect of his life, including our relationship. The revelation was both painful and liberating. I couldn't save my father from the consequences of his choices, but perhaps I could save myself. The morning after my father's call, I contacted Angela Wilson, a lawyer specializing in identity theft cases. Her office was in a converted brownstone near Boston Common, the interior surprisingly modern against the historic exterior. She listened intently as I explained my situation, taking notes and occasionally asking clarifying questions. "This is one of the more complex cases I've seen," she admitted when I finished. "Family identity theft is unfortunately common, but the organized crime element complicates matters significantly." She outlined a three-pronged approach: legal protection for me, criminal charges against my father, and coordination with law enforcement regarding Mendez. "We need to file formal charges against your father for identity theft and fraud," she explained, her tone compassionate but firm. "I understand he's your father, but legally documenting his crimes is essential for protecting your financial future." I nodded, pushing down the lingering guilt. "I understand. What do I need to do?" By that afternoon, I had signed affidavits confirming I had not authorized any of the accounts opened in my name. Angela filed emergency petitions with the credit bureaus and financial institutions. Detective Sanchez arrived to take my formal statement regarding the identity theft, separate from the assault charge already filed. "Your father's information about Mendez's money laundering could be valuable," she mentioned. "If he's willing to testify, we might be able to offer him some leniency." "If you find him," I reminded her. My father remained missing, his phone untraceable. The detective hesitated before continuing. "There's another option we've been considering. Mendez's operation has been on our radar for years, but we've never had enough evidence for charges that would stick. With your cooperation, we might be able to change that." "My cooperation?" I repeated, suddenly uneasy. "We could arrange for you to meet with Mendez's associates wearing a wire. You'd pretend to negotiate payment terms while gathering evidence of their threats and illegal lending activities." The proposal terrified me, but I found myself considering it. My father had created this mess, but Mendez and his operation were the real criminals. How many other families had they destroyed through predatory lending and threats? "It would be dangerous," Detective Sanchez acknowledged. "But we would have officers nearby at all times. This could be our best chance to bring down Mendez's operation." After consulting with Angela, who strongly cautioned against it but respected my decision, I agreed to the undercover operation. The following day, I sat in a nondescript van while a technician fitted me with a recording device, a watch with built-in microphone and transmitter. "Speak clearly, don't mention the wire, and try to get them to explicitly state their threats," Detective Sanchez instructed. "If you feel you're in danger at any point, use the phrase, 'My father always said to pay your debts.' That's our signal to intervene immediately." I called the number from the business card, my heart pounding so loudly I worried it would be picked up by the microphone. A man answered on the second ring. "I'm ready to discuss payment terms," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. "But I need to meet in person." 20 minutes later, I sat at a corner table in a coffee shop downtown, nursing an untouched latte while scanning the entrance for my contact. Two plainclothes officers sat at separate tables nearby, pretending to be engrossed in newspapers and laptops. The man who entered matched the description of Mendez's associate from the parking garage, tall, immaculately dressed, with an expression of perpetual boredom. He ordered at the counter before joining me, not bothering with introductions. "You have the money?" he asked, stirring his espresso. "Not yet," I replied. "I need time to liquidate assets, and I want to know exactly what I'm paying for." He raised an eyebrow. "Your father's debt. $800,000. Plus the $50,000 late fee for missing Monday's deadline." "That's not what I mean," I countered, leaning forward slightly to ensure the microphone captured everything. "My father mentioned he was doing more than just borrowing money from Mr. Mendez. Something about helping with financial transactions at the casinos?" The man's expression hardened. "Your father talks too much. That's part of his problem. I need to know what I'm buying with this payment, I insisted. If I pay, does that clear everything? All debts, all obligations, all records of whatever my father was doing. Mr. Mendez is reasonable, he replied carefully. If the debt is settled, certain arrangements can be forgotten. And if I can't pay the full amount? His smile was cold. There are alternatives. Your father has already been exploring them, disappearing, for instance. Or perhaps you'd prefer to work off the debt like he did. We always need reliable people to help move money through the system. You're suggesting I launder money for you? I asked, making sure the implication was crystal clear for the recording. He shrugged. I'm suggesting there are options beyond cash payment. Though Mr. Mendez prefers cash, we continued negotiating for another 15 minutes, during which he made several veiled threats and explicitly mentioned cleaning casino winnings for Mendez's organization. When we parted, I had arranged to meet him again the following day with a good faith payment of $50,000. The operation continued for 3 days, each meeting providing more incriminating evidence against Mendez's organization. I met with different associates, each more forthcoming than the last, as they believed I was cooperating. One even showed me spreadsheets detailing their money laundering operation through 3 different casinos, apparently convinced I would be taking over my father's role. During the final meeting, I nearly had a heart attack when the associate mentioned offhandedly, "Your watch is nice. New?" My hand instinctively moved to cover it before I forced a casual response about it being a gift. For a terrible moment, I thought he'd spotted the recording device, but he simply nodded and continued discussing payment schedules. Meanwhile, my Uncle Robert, my mother's brother, whom I hadn't spoken to in years, contacted me after hearing about the assault from family friends. Over dinner at his home in Somerville, he revealed what he knew about my father's gambling history. "It started before your mother died," he said quietly. "Isabella knew about the small bets, but not how quickly it was escalating. She made me promise not to tell you if anything happened to her. She always believed Harold would get help eventually." Robert had kept tabs on my father from a distance over the years, witnessing his decline but respecting my mother's wishes to keep me uninvolved. Now he provided crucial information about my father's earliest connections to Mendez's organization, dating back nearly 15 years. This new information, combined with the evidence from the wire recordings, gave Detective Sanchez enough to coordinate a sting operation targeting 2 of Mendez's collectors. The arrests led to search warrants for several properties connected to the organization, each yielding documentation of illegal lending practices and money laundering operations. Through it all, my father remained missing. The last confirmed sighting placed him in Atlantic City 3 days after the diner incident, but the trail had gone cold. I was torn between worry for his safety and anger at his continued absence while I cleaned up his mess. On the 8th day after the coffee attack, as I sat in Angela's office reviewing paperwork for credit bureau disputes, my phone rang with an unknown number. Against her advice, I answered. "They know you're working with the police." My father's voice was barely above a whisper. "You need to be careful, Ramiro." "Where are you?" I demanded. "Bus station. South Station. I'm coming back to Boston. This has to end." "Dad, don't," but he'd already hung up. I immediately called Detective Sanchez, who dispatched officers to South Station. "Don't go there yourself," she ordered. It could be a trap, but I couldn't stay away. Despite everything, he was still my father. I arrived at South Station 20 minutes later, scanning the crowds for his familiar silver hair and stooped shoulders. Police officers were positioned discreetly throughout the terminal, communicating via earpieces. I spotted him stepping off a bus from New York, carrying only a small duffel bag. He looked like he'd aged a decade in just over a week, unshaven, clothes wrinkled, eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. When he saw me, his expression crumpled. "I'm sorry," he said as he approached, his voice breaking. "For everything. The money, the lies, the coffee. I've been running my whole life, Ramiro. From grief, from failure, from responsibility. I can't run anymore." Before I could respond, Detective Sanchez and 2 officers appeared behind him. "Harold Vega?" she said formally. "You're under arrest for assault, identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering." As the officers handcuffed him, my father kept his eyes on me. "I understand if you can't forgive me," he said quietly, "but I hope someday you'll try." I watched in silence as they led him away, his shoulders slumped in defeat, finally taking responsibility for his actions after a lifetime of evasion. My emotions were too complex to name relief, grief, anger, and underneath it all, a strange sense of peace. The cycle of deception had finally been broken, even if the cost had been devastatingly high. 6 months passed. The seasons changed, summer heat giving way to autumn crispness, then the first tentative snowflakes of winter. My life, which had been violently upended that Sunday morning at Sally's Diner, gradually found a new equilibrium. My father pleaded guilty to all charges, receiving a 5-year sentence with possibility of parole after 3 years. His cooperation provided crucial evidence in the federal case against Victor Mendez and his organization. Mendez himself now faced money laundering, racketeering, and loan sharking charges that would likely keep him imprisoned for decades. My financial recovery progressed slowly but steadily. Angela's expertise helped remove the fraudulent accounts from my credit report, though rebuilding my once excellent credit score would take years. The frozen accounts were released, and I established comprehensive identity protection services to prevent future theft. The physical scars from the coffee burns faded from angry red to pale pink, still visible across my chest and arms, but no longer painful. In some ways, I appreciated these marks, tangible reminders of the moment I finally saw the truth about my father and our relationship. They became emblems of boundaries established and maintained. Therapy became an essential part of my weekly routine. Dr. Gabriela Martinez specialized in family trauma and addiction issues, helping me understand that my father's behavior wasn't a reflection of my worth. Children of addicts often internalize responsibility for their parents' actions, she explained during one session. You've spent your life trying to earn approval from someone incapable of giving it consistently. I joined a support group for families of gambling addicts, where I met others whose stories paralleled mine with eerie similarity. Parents who had drained college funds, spouses who had secretly remortgaged shared homes, children who had discovered their identities stolen by the people meant to protect them. Through their experiences, I gained perspective on my father's addiction, understanding it without excusing the devastation it caused. 3 months after his arrest, I visited my father in prison. The visiting room was sparse but clean, tables bolted to the floor and chairs designed for minimum comfort. He looked older in his standard-issue jumpsuit, but clearer somehow, his eyes more focused than I'd seen them in years. "Thank you for coming," he said, hands folded on the table between us. "I didn't expect you to. I almost didn't," I admitted. Our conversation that day was halting, awkward, but fundamentally different from any we'd had before. For the first time in our relationship, there were no lies between us, no pretenses, no facades, no financial schemes hidden behind fatherly advice. He spoke candidly about his addiction, tracing its roots to grief over my mother's death and his own father's gambling problems. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said toward the end of our visit. "Just a chance to know my son honestly for once. No manipulation, no hidden agenda." I made no promises that day, but I did return the following month, and the month after that. Our relationship would never be what it might have been without the addiction and betrayal, but perhaps it could become something new, something built on truth rather than obligation. In Seattle, I rebuilt my life with clearer boundaries and healthier relationships. I sold my condo, too many bad associations with Mendez's threats, and purchased a smaller house in a different neighborhood. The change of scenery helped mark the transition to this new chapter. My professional life flourished. After returning from extended leave, I threw myself into work with renewed focus, earning a promotion to technical director within 4 months. Colleagues who had witnessed the strange men searching for me now marveled at my resilience, though few knew the full story of what had transpired. Most surprisingly, Sophia, the nurse who had treated my coffee burns at Sally's Diner, became an important part of my life. After returning to Seattle, I'd sent her a thank you email, which led to occasional correspondence, then weekly video calls, and eventually her visit to Seattle during her vacation. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and careful, intentional sharing of ourselves. "I like that you don't hide your scars," she told me once, as we walked along Lake Washington. Physical or emotional. The greatest lesson from this ordeal was understanding the difference between enabling and supporting. For years, I'd confused the two, believing that sacrificing my own well-being for my father's approval was somehow honorable or dutiful. Now, I recognize that true support sometimes meant establishing firm boundaries and allowing others to face the consequences of their actions. I learned about the cycle of addiction, how it warps relationships, corrupts love, and perpetuates itself across generations. My grandfather's gambling had influenced my father's, and without intervention, the pattern might have continued. By breaking my silence and refusing to cover for him, I had perhaps broken this cycle for future generations of our family. The journey toward forgiveness remains complex and ongoing. Some days I feel compassion for my father, understanding how addiction hijacked his life and decisions. Other days, anger resurfaces when I deal with the lingering financial and emotional aftermath of his actions. Both reactions can coexist, neither negates the other. What I know with certainty is this: standing firm that Sunday morning, refusing to sacrifice my future to enable his addiction, was the right choice. The burns have healed, the debts have been addressed, and for perhaps the first time in my adult life, I am living authentically, not seeking approval from someone incapable of providing it consistently. For anyone watching this who recognizes patterns of addiction or manipulation in their own families, please know that establishing boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. Supporting someone doesn't mean destroying yourself in the process. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for an addict is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their actions. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with someone you love? How did you balance compassion with self-protection? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else facing similar challenges. And if you found value in my journey, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories of overcoming family trauma and building healthier relationships. Remember, healing isn't linear, but it is possible one day, one decision, one boundary at a time. Thank you for listening. In this shocking Reddit family drama, I share how my Sunday breakfast tradition turned into a nightmare when my father presented me with his $800,000 gambling debt. When I refused to bankrupt myself to pay off his loan sharks, he threw scalding coffee at me, leaving second-degree burns across my chest. This Reddit family drama escalated as I discovered decades of his gambling addiction, identity theft using my information, and connections to organized crime. Through police cooperation and painful confrontations, I finally established boundaries with my father while facing dangerous loan sharks threatening my life. This Reddit family drama reveals the hidden damage of gambling addiction on families and the difficult journey toward healing. Watch my full story of betrayal, boundary setting, and eventual resolution in this incredible Reddit family drama that forever changed my relationship with my father. Sometimes, the most painful Reddit family drama teaches the most powerful lessons about standing up for yourself.